Welcome in, everybody. Another 5 minutes with Sean, maybe 10 sit-down edition. And on top of that, Mental Health Monday. You know, for years now, we've been committed to mental health on this show. I think it's very, very important for people in general. Obviously, being in the car business, I think it's important. Today's guest is in the sports business, I think, for lack of a better term, which it is also kind of, not talked about as much in the world of that. So we're going to be in today with Mikey Henninger. Mikey, how are you, man?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I know as both Wisconsin guys, right now we look outside to a blizzard here as we record this for this upcoming Monday morning, but that's about the only bad news. So, Mikey, when you and I first started chatting, we were talking about mental health. I get excited when other people in other industries want to come on the show and talk about it. So let's just kick this off in the most natural way possible. And let me ask you, when you think of mental health, what comes to mind? Why is it important to you? I've seen you talk about it. You mention it, throughout what you do. What is it about it, man?
Yeah, man, that's a good question. And candidly, it's something that I hadn't really started focusing on until, I don't know, maybe I turned 30 and I'm 34 now, right? So it's, the first 20, 30 years of my life, it's not really something I thought much of. And I don't know if that's because I'm a man and it's like not a common thing for a man to be talking about mental health, or I don't know if it's a generation thing, or maybe you're just young and you don't worry about it. But nowadays, to me, I feel like I've had this big enlightening or this big awakening here in the last few years where the only thing that matters is, my mental health, my happiness, and nothing else in the world that I want to happen can happen if I'm not in a good place mentally, if I'm not happy, if I'm not taking, as Marshawn Lynch would like to say, I'm not taking care of my mentals. Right. So,
right.
To me, it's all about my big thing, dude, is we have one life. That's it. Maybe you believe in reincarnation and all that, and I'm cool with that.
Right. But for this name, for this body, this is it. I agree.
For this life, this is all we got, right? So you can't afford to spend it being miserable, being unhappy, not taking care of yourself. Even, it could come down to a lot of things. It could come down to your career. I think I spent a decade plus doing stuff that paid bills, but wasn't really fulfilling. It wasn't like anything I was particularly passionate about. And that's been a big change for me over the last year and a half too. So to me, it's just, the whole thing is you have one life to live. You get one crack at this. So if you're not spending your days doing what you can to make yourself happy so that you can take care of your family, take care of your friends, take care of the things you want to take care of, it's almost kind of like, what are we even doing here if we're not focusing on that first?
I couldn't agree more. I love the fact that it's funny, you referenced like a change in you in like the last year or two, right? And from watching your journey from afar, it would appear to me that in the last year or two, you have gone from a corporate job into an entrepreneurial job, into something that is about you and what you want to do. And typically, entrepreneurs find and align with passion. That's what I find. That's how they get started. They give a shit about something more than someone else, and they decide, all right, this is what I'm going to do, right? And so this is what I think, and this is what I've seen from you. And so, I think you were talking about it recently, where it's been like around a year or thereabouts for your decision. Did you find it to be a priority you made because you had the time to consider it, or is it because you realized that you were? I don't want to say that your life's being sucked away by corporations, although I quietly do feel that way. But it's a joke. The point is did you feel more empowered to speak on it and think about it more because you had the time and no one around you to worry about what that or how that was portrayed?
I think it's a little bit of both. If I had to pick one, it's probably more the latter. But for me, I'm going to sound like every entrepreneur in the world here, but it's a unique scenario. It was a unique situation for me. So for me, it was a combination of two different things, kind of down the path that you were just talking about. Number one, I was more and more finding myself with the Sunday scaries or waking up on a random Tuesday morning and be like, man, this isn't what I want to do for the next 8 hours. What am I doing? I'm spending 40 hours of my week every single week doing something that doesn't fill me with energy, doesn't fill me with passion. Why am I spending my life doing it this way? But on the the other side of that, I was fortunate enough to have some social proof behind what it is that I do that gave me the confidence to say that I'll be okay if I go do the entrepreneur thing. So to expand on that a little bit, for those of you listening, I create fantasy football resources, all this kind, people use my research and my resources in their fantasy football leagues. And I started making that available to the public like 3 years ago, just kind of for free, just for fun as a hobby. And it got to a point where people on Reddit were actually like donating money to use the resources, which led me to realize, okay, there's some social proof here. There's an opportunity to turn this into a business. So for me, it was a nice little crossroads of I don't like what I'm doing with my life, combined with, okay, there's social proof to tell me, give me a reason to believe I can go out on my own and try and do something for me, So I don't think it would have been as easy for me if that social proof didn't otherwise exist,
Yeah, well, Sam, I think that allows you to do, people always say, oh, Sean, being an entrepreneur, what a huge risk you took. Not a risk taker. I'm going to take things all the way out as far as I can extrapolate and say, look, if this, all the way to where it looks good or looks bad, right? I plan my risk it's as well thought out as I can possibly be, right? With any risk that I take. Sure. And so a side hustle, which is kind of what you had, right? It was free, so it really wasn't a hustle. It was just something you invested your own time in.
Yep.
I think the explosion of that market of the world, right, with daily fantasy leagues, you start seeing the daily fantasy now with the gambling attached to it, right, Mikey? So now I think research and development of what people want to look into has become even more important. Mm-hmm. So you were already ahead of a gambling curve that once they caught you sort of waved over and you were able to just get on and ride. And so I think it's awesome. But when you think about the mental health side, I think it was obviously, like you said, easier on the mental health to make the step, knowing it had already,
totally
made itself money without you even trying to make itself money.
For sure. And what's kind of weird about it too, is that when you look at it purely from an on paper standpoint and from a logistics standpoint, it wasn't a smart move for me. Like I left a very comfortable paycheck, very comfortable money. Yeah. I have a wife. I have 2 kids under 7 years old. I have a mortgage to pay. So like,
dude, look, I had a wife and that was it. We were paying rent. We don't have kids. I had plenty of savings, but I'm in the same boat, right? I left a 6-figure job, cushy as all get out, where I could have kicked my feet up for the next 40 years. People maybe not even realize I was there. Right. I wouldn't have realized they were there. It was a satellite job. Holy cow. This is awesome. Yep. It stuck my will to live. I have it didn't do anything for me. I uprooted my life in beautiful Colorado to move back to where I'm from in the Midwest was already not my plan, right? And all these things had happened for this corporate job. And I kept thinking to myself, there's got to be something better, right? There's got to be a better way forward. And for my mental health, that's what I had to decide. But it's not easy, right? I mean, first 2 years of this company, I paid myself what I made in high school.
Right.
So, that's a bite to take, but 10 years later, I can assure you it was the second best decision I've ever made in my life.
What's the first?
Marrying my wife.
My wife? Yeah.
There's no option B without option A. The whole mess happens. When I met my wife, I was in a pretty rough place in my life. I worked a lot. I was a holic of whatever you wanted to name or put before it, whether it was work, booze, or anything else. Sure. And so, it wasn't for me. Met her, changed my life. And again, talk about mental health, right? I'm a kid of therapy. So my dad was an alcoholic. So I kind of grew up in that space and had to deal with all that. And so I was aware of it. But when I met my wife, she was just so self-aware, Mikey, like in a way where you look at yourself and you were just like, I don't know shit about myself. Like I listen to the way this girl talks about what she knows, how she feels, what she looks at. Right. And that just motivated me to want to go find out more about who I was. Right. So I see a therapist every month. I know it's not, manly or whatever, but I don't give a fuck. Like I'm interested in being best for me, as you said, for our families.
100%. Yeah, man. And I'm a big believer, and I know you said you've seen some of my LinkedIn stuff, but I'm a big believer about like your circle, the people you let into it, the people you let out of.
It's my next note, dude. It's my next note to talk to you about, because it's something that people don't say that shit out loud, Mikey.
I know.
People don't post about how, you know what? I don't know if I need this person in my life. And I'm going to tell you, in the last 3 weeks, I've been thinking about you, and I've been thinking about those posts. and I've been doing it in a different way. I've been cleaning out my feed, dude. So in my LinkedIn feed, I'm just like, you know what? Mikey says I don't need to carry this with me. I'm done with this person, you know, and it was just things I was carrying along. And I noticed every time I looked at their stuff, I thought, whatever, right? I had some negative approach to their stuff, or some frustration where it was like, this bullshit liar, I can't stand. And instead of trying to fix the world, because I'm just not in that business,
right?
I thought, I got to fix me, so I'm going to clean up my feed. So tell me, man, when did this whole edit the circle, edit the feed, edit the people around me, when did that happen for you? And what was the genesis?
And that's a great question. It's kind of, I don't know, it goes back to that whole, what I was just saying, it's kind of a newer thing for me. It's been a really fresh focus as of the last few years. I just recently posted, like, if you look, I got married back in 2015. And if you look at my wedding party then versus what it would be if I got married tomorrow, completely different, like a lot of the guys. And you know what? Some of it is just a different people type of thing, right? I don't have any ill will. It's just, we're not compatible.
People mature and they grow and they go in different directions. Take it from me, dude. Is the guy with no kids in the group?
Sure.
Yeah. You know, like the weirdness of like, oh, well, they don't want to be around kids. Like, we didn't say that. We just chose not to have them for ourselves. But it creates distance, right? When you don't have like commonality.
Things change. Yeah. So it's partially that, but the other part is kind of like you were talking about with the digital thing of people like just seeing or being around somebody or hearing something, and you automatically get into this cringy, negative, like you can just feel it in your body where you're like, I don't have a good feeling when I'm around this human being. And look, I'll put it candidly, in the last, I think it was about a year and a half ago, there was somebody who stood up in my wedding, and I completely cut him out of my life for a lot of different reasons. But really what it comes down to is I would get a text message on my phone. It would say from this person, and I would instantly like feel anxious.
It's
like,
visceral.
I don't want to read this. I don't even want to see what this is. And that's not supposed to be a relationship with a best friend. You're supposed to be like, oh, cool, my buddy, like, what does he want? And nowadays, so for me, there's a big focus, right? Nowadays, there's 5 or 6 guys that I consider, you know, my best of friends in the world. And a lot of them don't live anywhere near here. Some are in like Austin, Texas, that I met through the fantasy football world. But it's to me, it's just been a very big focus in the last several years of like, listen, I am in control of who's in my circle and who's out of my circle. Like if you're not somebody that fills me with energy or fills me with passion, I'm not saying you need to like support every decision I do or agree with everything I ever do. But if I have an automatically negative feeling just from being in or around your presence, that there's no reason for me to fill my life with that.
Yeah, I'm not looking for co-signers, right? I'm looking for people to challenge me. It's the first thing I loved about my wife when I met her. You know what I mean? It was like, I'd say something. She'd be like, yeah, why? And I was just like, what does it matter? I just said why. It doesn't matter. And it was like, no, get into why you feel this way, right? So you do that. You start uncovering that. Now, we're talking about friends, but I got to tell you, in the last couple of years, I've made the same move, but I've made it even further in, right, with family. I've got this whole thing that look, we were born together. We were born into the same family. That wasn't nobody's choice. Mm-hmm. Now I'm in my 40s. Life's full of choices. And I don't have to be making these. Just because we share a bloodline doesn't mean we need to share a friendship. And I think it gets confusing. People, oh, what a terrible person you are. You don't care about other people. Well, hold on. Anyone in my circle will tell you I will give you 150% of whatever I have. Mm-hmm. Exactly. If I feel reciprocated. If I don't, then I won't. I don't know why that's hard to get.
It shouldn't be hard to get. And I feel you, man. There have been a couple of family ties on my side, nobody immediate, thankfully, but in my extended family where there was a lot of drama for my wedding. For example, my cousin, who I hadn't talked to in 15 years, was all offended that she didn't get an invite. And it's like, you're not the one paying for just because we're from the same bloodline, but we haven't spoken in 15 years. Now I'm supposed to I have X amount of people that I can invite, and I'm going to spend it on people that are legitimately a part of my life, whether they're friends, family, coworkers, whatever.
Totally. And it's always the wedding, right, Mikey? Like my wife's family has like 12 people in it. So in trying to balance a wedding that her folks were offering to pay for, my family's about 200 people. So it was like, all right, well, we're not going to do that to them. That's not fair. Then you go to my folks and they're like, well, I have to have all these people. I'm like, that's not a thing.
Yeah. It's the older generation.
It is. 15 people. If they bring work people, they're going to have 20. You can't bring 60. It's not right. And it just created all this drama and, oh, well, then I won't invite you to my wedding. And I'm okay, fine. Like if that's what we're doing, if we're going to tit for tat life, like I don't care enough, right? About that shit. But apparently a lot of people do, and it bites on them. So I don't know. To me, Mikey, I love the fact that you talk about the edit. And I hope more people watching today take stock in the idea of the edit. You know, like you said, you got a wedding photo from 8 years ago that if we back to the future that thing, half them people would disappear off that photo. Yeah, they would not be there, right?
Yep.
That's powerful shit though, to know. And you're like you said, you're 34 years old. That's probably just about the time I figured it out. And now you get to continue to grow into that and have your kids surrounded by people that matter to you, that maybe they call your friends uncles because that's what they know and that's what they're cool with. Yeah. That's how I grew up, and that was cool with my folks.
And that's exactly the idea too. There is like, I want my kids to understand that they are in control of their circle, the people they let in, the people they let out. What's funny about that wedding photo is if you look at my wife's side, all of those bridesmaids would still be her bridesmaids to this day. And I think that is one of the biggest things that I learned from her when I, got married to her. And the longer I've been with her, the more I see what true friendship looks like and what you're supposed to get out of a reciprocal friendship. And that made it easy for me to examine my own friendships and be like, wait, this is fake. None of this is real. Like, this is all not what I want.
Did any of that come from her, Mikey? Was any of that influenced by your wife by saying, hey, Mikey, have we taken stock of X, Y, and Z, or does she stay in the background and bring it, support you when you bring it to her? How does that conversation happen?
She kind of stays in the background. If anything, she's the one that says, are you sure you want to cut them out? They're such a big part of your pet. Like, she's the one that's trying to like maybe keep the door open for some of these relationships. And I keep telling her, like, listen, just because somebody is a part of my past, they don't automatically get a free ticket to my future. That's not how any of that works.
Yeah.
But yeah, if anything, she's the one that tries to, keep that door open, because to her, there's a little bit of sadness there that some of these guys I was friends with when I was a little kid. And, it's just not quite there anymore. So to her, she's like, there's history there. There's history. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm focused on now and the future. The history is great and I'm thankful for it, but that's not where I'm going.
I mean, look, I got a business partner, besides my wife, our other business partner I've known since I was 13 years old, right? So we know each other 30 years. We have a group of people that are all in that. Recently, a buddy's dad passed away. So we all went down there for a funeral, and he and I walk in as entrepreneurs, business guys. And these guys, the same bit of the core was there as well. And nothing had changed about the core, right? This is 11 o'clock on a Sunday. The core's drinking beers around the back of a pickup truck.
Sure.
Right? So I walk in, they're in jeans and a t-shirt. I walk in a beautiful suit, shirt, and tie, because I'm at an Italian funeral. I thought that's what, the rules were, right? And they're like, oh yeah, we all work for other people. And I was like, oh, well, if all four of you do the same thing, couldn't you guys just, come together and be your own bosses? And they're like, who wants the headache, right? And right there, you stop and you go, that's always going to be the difference between us. I want the headache, because you guys answering to other people, worrying about getting a $1 raise or a $2. That doesn't, none of it computes with me, right? Because it's all on my shoulders as an entrepreneur to make the next step, make the next revenue hit. And so it just shocked me that we were so different, yet we had grown up so close, and all the memories, and people go down mystery lane, right? And they're like, oh, remember this? And you're just like, 30 years? Come on, man. Like, that's the reference point you have for me. So yeah, dude, it doesn't matter how long they've been around, Mikey. I love that. You know me in the past, you don't get a ticket to the future.
Right.
That's more than fair. Has that put any other, so like we have a circle, right? As I assume you do. So if within the circle, if you're disconnecting from some of it, but not all of it, the part you don't disconnect from, is there an awkwardness? Is there a reasoning? Did they begin to analyze, look at their friendships and say to themselves, I don't need to be in this either? Like, what's happened with that if it was a circle of guys that were sitting up in the wedding?
What's crazy is logistically you would think it would, right? Because typically with a circle, there's 20 people in it. And if you remove yourself from one of them, then there's going to be some branches off of that. But
yeah,
I got to say, in my experience, it hasn't really changed much. In fact, that main guy that I was telling you about, that was a big part of my childhood, and I just kind of cut him out completely. I decided it was enough. We had this big falling out, and that was I'm still really good friends with his brother. So like,
and his brother probably knows who his brother is. And I find that to be the case with some people, right? Because they say, look, I get it.
For sure. And to be fair, to your point, they have their own issues from time to time. In fact, to this very second, I have no idea if they're on speaking terms or not on speaking terms, because that seems to change
as brothers.
But yeah, correct.
As brothers. I mean, dude, it happens, right? Family stuff comes up, weird shit happens. I've gone through a lot with my family in the last couple of years.
100%.
It relates around people making decisions that, just didn't seem fair to me.
Yeah.
And I'm not someone who plays the fair game very often. I don't really ever get emotional about family shit. So when I do, I would hope people would take me more seriously. And for some reason, they just tend to want to brush me off more. And it's just like, wait, I say something about 1 in every 10 things that happens around here. But the one time I say it, people are like, oh, you need to get over that. It's like, well, that's fucking weird. And I'm not going to just get over things to get over things, because that's not, I need to talk through it. I need to understand the reasonings behind it. I can't just, hey, let's just shake on it and move on, put it under a rug. That rug's bound to come up again, and all that shit underneath is bound to fly out.
Well, and that argument's inherently flawed to begin with. If somebody, that's one big thing that I'm like, if there's one big challenge that I have as a dad, it's being patient with my kids and not doing the whole, hey, you need to get over that, because that's inherently, like, human beings don't just be like, okay, let me flip the switch and now I'm good, I'm over it. That's not how human beings, that's not how brains work. Whatever you feel is valid. It's completely valid because you feel it. You're a human being that's feeling what you feel. Whether or not I would feel that way, that's a different story, but that doesn't matter. I'm not the one feeling it. You're the one feeling it. So we need to work together to figure out what you feel and how to move past it together, instead of just being like, no, don't feel that way. And I'll tell you what, man, that, like, I'm kind of a hypocrite, because there's times where my kids they're upset about, like, me picking out the wrong color cup. And I'm like, dude, it's a color cup. You got to get over it. But it's like, no, for some reason that color cup is important to him. And it's my responsibility as his dad to be like, okay, why does this matter to you? And if you help me understand it, then maybe I can make the right decision in the future.
Maybe next time I won't grab yellow, I'll grab blue, bro. Let me know. I mean, if it's a serious thing,
help me get it,
Yeah.
And that's
because I think about it, when you understand is important for everyone, right? In conversation.
Yeah. Think about it. When he's 6 years old and I'm telling him, dude, yellow doesn't matter, blue doesn't matter, like, just, it's a cup, it holds your liquid. But he's 6, man. Like, their brains are different than ours. It does matter to him. I don't know why, but it's my job to figure out why.
Right? And he can apply it to something else down the road that it isn't applicable, but he could still make the connection because that's what he heard, right? Children and trauma, and not in a way, Mikey, where you're creating trauma in children. But the point is, right, is that's all now, that's like the hottest topic running, right? Is like generational trauma and trauma of things we weren't aware of, and what happened to our parents happened to us, and all these things, right? It all kind of adds up. And so you as a parent, I applaud you, man, for trying to take that step, try and get around that. And not just say, here's the yellow cup, but say, why? Because to me, as your dad, it shouldn't matter, but that's me. Why to you does it matter? And I don't know, what does your 6-year-old say to you, Mikey? I mean, are we having a good back and forth here? Does this just end with, because I want it? What happens there?
More often than not, there's no logistical reason. It's probably my deduction from it all is that they have already determined they're in whatever mood that they're in, and they're using the cup as a way to express that mood and that feeling.
Got it. It's not, so it wouldn't, you could have grabbed the green one, it would have been the yellow one. It really didn't matter the cup.
Didn't matter at all. Yeah. And it's definitely more my 3-year-old than my 6-year-old. But even today, my 6-year-old he's a very sensitive kid. He's very, like, first child, right? Doesn't want to do any wrong, wants to follow all the rules, wants to please everybody, doesn't want anybody to, get hurt or anything like that. So he's very sensitive and he's easily affected with his mood. And it's important for my wife and I to remember to remain patient, because there's times where we get frustrated because we're like, dude, this is not something to be worked up about. This is, candidly, like, I'll just say, we'll be like, this is stupid. This is a stupid thing to get upset about, but that's us. That's not him. He's like, whether we like
okay for the two of you to say that behind closed doors, like, dude, this kid is killing me. He's bringing up the world's craziest shit. But to him, it might be the most important thing in the moment. And I think those things stack up, right? If it just,
whether
crazy.
We feel it, whether we agree with it or not, he is feeling that. It's happening through his body and his mind, So it's like, we can't just discount that and be like, no, that's dumb, let's move on. Because it doesn't matter what we think. It matters how he's feeling, And
it's crazy because how often this happens in places of work, right? Why mental health doesn't get discussed in places of work. Again, I grew up in car dealerships. You don't have a mental health day. You barely have a sick day, and all of these things, right? And you couldn't come into work and be like, hey, can we just talk about what happened yesterday, how I'm feeling?
Can't do that.
Get over it. It was yesterday. Let's go on right now is what matters. How are you balancing that as you're an entrepreneur? I think you're pretty small, right? I don't know if it's a solopreneur at this point or you got another person with you, but
my wife helps, but it's pretty much just me.
Yeah. So there's not really a hierarchy or anyone you to go, Mike. Who are you talking to about your feelings, Mikey? How are you expressing your mental health, your discussion points? What are you doing to do that?
So number one is my wife. And there's times where, I never acknowledge that she's right about this, but I should, but she always says, you should go talk to a therapist or talk to somebody whose profession is this, because there's probably times where I lay too much on her, right? And she's not a professional to be trained. She's a human being, and there's, and it's probably not fair for me to take all of my world's problems and just go dump them on her, even though she's my person. And it's the sort of thing where it's like, I'm sure you've heard the new philosophy of like, if somebody's venting to you, you ask them, are you looking for a solution or an ear to talk at? And that's a question that she asks me relatively frequently. And if I'm looking for like help, like what do I do with this? She's willing to help, but if it's on a deeper level, she'll say, have you thought about talking to a therapist about this stuff? Because I'll do what I can. I'm your wife, of course I'll try, but like some of this might be deeper rooted than what I can do for you as a human being. Besides my wife, the other place, honestly, that's a big outlet for me is writing to myself. It's something that I did when I was a kid. Like my mom, journaling. Yeah. My mom was the one who introduced me to the concept a long time ago. And when she did, I thought it was the dumbest thing on the planet. I was like, what? Like, I'm not keeping a diary. This is stupid. I'm a high school man. I don't need a diary. Right. Just dumb, like inappropriate, like immature stuff. But it's something I recently got back to. And it's funny enough. You just sit down at night, and I try to do it every night, but it's not realistic. Like there's times where I'm just beat and I'm not writing anything down, but the nights when I do sit down and write, it's amazing how much I have to say that I didn't realize at the time. I'll sit down like, what am I even going to write about? And then before you know it, I have 2 pages. And then by the way, frequently that becomes part of my LinkedIn content, because I'm like, if I'm feeling this, there's somebody else in the world who's feeling this and can relate to this. So I'm going to put it out there into the world. So a lot of times my journaling turns into a LinkedIn post because I know that there's somebody else out there that might be thinking it, but might think it's not okay to think that way because they might think nobody else does. Yeah. Or say it.
Yeah, no, I mean, dude, look, this show is this is my journal. This show has been on, we've been out every Monday. Now I think 260 straight Mondays. We're like the Brett Favre, Cal Ripken of podcasts,
that's
right.
That's streak. Yeah,
we've never missed a Monday. I put a lot of pride in all of that, but it's what I do. This show is as much for me as it is for whoever watches it.
Right.
And I get people. Oh well, Sean, you only get a couple hundred views. You get this, you get that. I don't really care if I got 6 views. Because then 5 people heard it. Maybe it resonated with one of them. Maybe it didn't. And it's cliche to say if it only hits with one person, I did my job. But it's clearly what most people should think on social media, because the majority of people will never go viral. They will never be a big as deal as whoever it is they think they should be.
Yeah.
So you have to balance that with itself though, right? And so I'm with your wife though, Mikey. Go get a therapist, bro. I think it's super helpful. I think it's great. And like I was just talking with my wife, I like my therapist because she challenges me, right? So she doesn't, I don't need, as I said earlier, I don't need cosigners. I don't need that. I didn't marry a cosigner. I don't want to talk to cosigners. I don't want to do business with cosigners. I want people to challenge what it is I'm saying, I'm knowing, they're saying.
Totally.
And so you can find it, man. So go do that. I think it'll be helpful because our wives, they deal with us as entrepreneurs. That's a lot. Do you know what I mean? It's a ton. Yeah. And my wife's coming up on a decade's worth of that. And the decade before that, she was a car guy's wife and I was working 80 plus hours a week. So I haven't really made it the easiest on her, but entrepreneur life, I think is better than that, the 80 hours a week.
And we got to give them more credit too. Think about it, right? We're one branch of their tree, right? My wife, she's a teacher, a middle school teacher at that. So she's dealing with all kinds of hormones all day, every day. She's the mother of a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. And it's like, I'm just one bucket of her overall, I'm just one branch of her tree. If you will.
You should probably find someone else to branch that tree off on, just, as an outlet, like you say, professional, man. There could be some I started going for business. That was what my lady was referring to me for. And then it just evolves because my business is my life. And
It's
so one
one and
is
the same,
tied
yeah.
to the next.
Oh, 100%, man. And I think, by the way, what you were talking about earlier with like, oh, 100 views, 6 views, I think it's totally spot on. If you have somebody who's watching this like over and over again, that means what you're doing is impacting somebody and it's helping somebody. And I think especially as grown adult men, it's important for us to continue talking about this stuff because traditionally we've never been allowed to, right? We've always needed to be the like strong, steady, no emotion type of, and that's not how humans are, man. We like guys feel stuff too. And our brains are just as screwed up as anybody else's.
And it's not about, and I like that. And look, man, you've been gracious with your time. We're coming up near the end. And I want to say that's a great way to look at this way on the way out, though, is that grown-ass men talking about how they feel is no longer taboo. It's no longer not allowed. It needs to be encouraged at the highest levels of any conversation that people can be having. They should be considering the concept of how mental health plays into it. And what's going to happen next with how they feel. And if you're someone who's watching this, you say, look, man, enough with the feeling stuff. That means you got a bunch of feelings that you're just not able to express yet. And if you can find a way to express them, you're going to be a lot more better off. So, Mikey, as we wrap this up, what would you leave with with men of the age of, you're at 34, I'm at 42. What piece of advice would you give to them as someone who's newly found, your words, not mine, right? Yeah. Newly found the depth of the concept and meaning to them of mental health. What would you say to folks to try and get them to potentially find that for themselves?
The number one thing that comes to mind is I would be as quick as you can to swallow your ego and swallow your pride, because it doesn't matter. In fact, it's going to get you into more trouble. It's going to get you deeper into whatever negative emotion you may or not be feeling, or worse than that, whatever, negative outlets you may be experiencing or craving, or anything that you need to help self-medicate, I guess would be the term that I'm looking for there. But I think you're spot on, Sean, that it's not as taboo as it once was, but it's still there's still a lot of guys out there that they're just not comfortable yet with that. Like, I'm going to talk to somebody about my feelings. And you know what? If you're worried about it and it is a pride thing and it's an ego thing, then don't talk to your friends. Don't talk to your family. Go talk to somebody.
Go find someone, man. They can't even tell them you talk to them. It's all private. So if you need to go 100%. Talk to somebody, do that. Mikey, do you find that as you become more enlightened with regards to this stuff and been more about it, have you had your inner circle approach you about things they're dealing with, or have people kind of come to you and say, hey, now that I know you're into this, I kind of want to relinquish that? Because since I launched this on this show, man, I get a lot of messages from folks want to come on the show and talk about their mental health. And it fills me with pride. It fills me with smiles. Some of the stories are really tragic, and that does not. But the fact that people want to share them and come on here and use that platform. So are you finding that to be the case in your own circle?
Yes and no. So I would say that's a really good question. And here's why. When it comes to my inner circle, right, my closest people, the people I go catch a game with, go have a beer with, whatever, I can't say too much has changed there, but I believe that's because I've always prided myself on this. I've always been the type of friend that will tell you what I think you need to hear as opposed to what you want to hear. So I'm always 100 with my friends. I've always been honest with them. At times, like my brother-in-law, for example, he'll be like, yeah, sometimes I don't come talk to you because I know you're going to speak truth and you're going to talk to me about things that I just want somebody to tell me that I'm right. Yeah. But I will say there's been a noticeable difference digitally online on like LinkedIn, for example. People hop in my DMs and like, I had a dad not too long ago that reached out. He's like, hey, my son is about 18 years old. He's a little bit, what's the word? Not troubled. He's just, I don't know. I don't know how to, I can't think of what word I'm thinking of, but having some issues with his 18-year-old son, and his son is a big sports guy, a big fantasy football guy. And this dad just reached out to me like, is there any chance, like any message? Would you be willing to speak with him? So I do have people that are like reaching out, and I'm happy to talk to people about that stuff because I think if more of us in the world are focusing on how we are doing mentally, then I think a lot of today's world problems would like not solve themselves, but we wouldn't see as many. I think a lot of the issues that we see in the world today are people dealing with their own demons and their own, letting their mental health get to such a negative state that they're not doing anything about it. So I'm always happy to talk to anybody. But to answer your question, the inner circle, I can't say much has changed, but the online presence. There's been a lot of strangers, if you will, reaching out to me saying, hey, I saw your video and I'd like to talk to you, blah, blah, blah.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Well, I'm really glad, Mike, you came on here. We had the chance to share this. I really appreciate the work that you're doing on the, not only on the entrepreneur side, obviously, and the mental health side, but the fantasy football stuff. People enjoy it, man. I watch the engagement. I watch the work. Admittedly, as I told you in one of the posts, I had a terrible season. So clearly I need to change my life and change the way I've been doing fantasy football. And as soon as Wisconsin legalizes gambling, I think I'm really going to hit it up on your end.
Yeah.
If and when they get done losing money to borders here. But at the end of the day, Mikey, thank you so much for being on. Thank you for being honest with us and sharing your point of view. I really appreciate it, man.
Dude, it was my pleasure. A lot of times people ask me to come on and talk football. So it was nice to switch it up and talk about something that's a little bit more important, if you will.
I'm glad you said it, because normally people come on here, they want to talk about the car business, and I'm like, yeah, I get it. I love the car business, but mental health. So thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you so much. You want to find Mikey? He's all over LinkedIn. Mikey, anywhere else folks can find you?
Well, if you are into the fantasy football thing, I'd say Twitter at BBFF Mikey. That's where I do most of my fantasy hanging out.
All right. Twitter is where he goes and does that work there. LinkedIn is where I see a little bit more of, I guess, the personal messaging. I don't know how I want to say that, but that's what it looks like. Well, thank you so much, my man. I really appreciate it. Everyone, thank you for joining us. I hope this was a wonderful way to kick off your March, because that was the point of it. Get you started, get you ready to close out Q1. Thank you so much. Have a great day, and we'll see you next week.
Later, guys.